What is a supernatural event that happened in your life that just cannot be explained? I was in the kitchen cleaning up, waiting for my kid's bus. I saw it pull up, and I saw him get off. He didn't come in. He'd started playing around with hiding under the window to jump out and say boo. So I thought that's what he was doing. But I walked out and he wasn't there. I called his name. I looked around the house thinking he was hiding from me, but I couldn't find him. I circled the house calling for him, and the parent panic set in. It probably only lasted 90 seconds, but it felt a lot longer. Then his bus pulled up, and he got off. We were about 13, my best friend and I. She lived on the second story of an apartment building. After playing indoors, we decided to go outside. As soon as we stepped out, her in front of me, I said, "Oh, it's so cold." And I left the door slightly open to grab my coat off the couch. Then we ran back outside together. I stopped at the door to put my coat on, but she kept running to the end of the balcony, where the stairs led down to an empty parking lot. Trying to be sneaky and scare her, I snuck up behind her as she looked quietly over the railing. When I got about 3 feet away, she turned around, smiled, and darted around the corner and down the stairs. I laughed and chased after her. I thought it was odd how quickly she got down those stairs and found a place to hide. The stairs led to an empty parking lot. She was nowhere to be found. Confused, I circled back around to the other staircase, an apartment complex length away. The only other way up. I made my way across, and up, and back to her apartment without seeing her. I opened her door at the same moment she was walking out. I said, "How did you get back inside so fast?" She said, "What do you mean? I went in right behind you." To get my coat, too. She has sworn on everything sacred to her, then and every year since, that it was not her at the top of those stairs. I had a phase in my mid-teens when I would read the obituaries in the local newspaper. I saw a name that was familiar. It was the same as a family friend, with his full first, middle, and last names. I didn't say anything to my parents, since I figured they already knew. A few days later, my mom told me he died. I said I knew, since I saw his obituary. She said, "He died last night in his sleep." I went back through the newspapers. My mom kept them for a week before throwing them out. The obituary wasn't there. When the real one came out, it had his first and last name, but just his middle initial. This was almost 40 years ago, and I still think about it. There's a place in my hometown called Old Town. It's an area they had to evacuate because a mine underneath made the ground unsafe. Sinkholes and worse. I was in a class in middle school where you did outdoor things. And we went to Old Town to do some geocaching. While the class was walking, we saw an old woman in a rocking chair, sitting on a concrete foundation where a house used to be. She was dressed like an old-timey old lady. She was rocking back and forth, talking to herself, staring off into the woods. She never looked at us once. We found the geocache a little down the road, turned around, and she and the rocking chair were gone. There was no way she could have gotten away that fast, carrying a rocking chair, without us seeing her. We were only at the geocache for about 5 minutes. It confused everybody. I woke up to a strange feeling and saw an opaque silhouette of a little boy standing on the other side of the apartment, facing me. I turned on my light, and it was gone. When I turned the light off, I saw it again. I flipped the light back on and went over there to make sure there was nothing that could be casting a strange shadow. There was nothing that could have created that specific shape. And it was standing in the pathway between my couch and the wall. So it couldn't have been a shadow at all. I turned my light off again. It was there. I flipped it back on and slept with the light on for the rest of the night. I couldn't sleep without the light on for days. My buddy and I were playing tennis one night at some courts by my house. The lights usually went out at 11. But for whatever reason that night, they went off at a strange time, 10:43. We collected our things and started walking to my car. About 500 feet from the courts. My buddy's mom pulled up right as we got there and said, "Where the hell have you been? I called your cell, and some guy was just laughing. It didn't sound like you." It was then my buddy realized he didn't have his phone on him. He told his mom to call it again. And we could see it light up in the middle of the court we'd been playing on. Right by the net, nowhere near where we'd kept the rest of our stuff. He went and got it, and there was only the one missed call from his mom. The one she had just made. He asked if she'd called the right number. And her call log showed 3 calls to his phone that night. We can't explain why the phone was on the court, or what happened with the calls, or what happened with the lights. This didn't happen to me. But a very nice old man and his wife used to live a few streets over from us. She got very sick, and his son flew in to help care for her. A few weeks later, she moved to hospice, and then she died. The night she died, her husband and son drove home together, talking about what to do for the funeral. The husband asked, "Do you think she'd want so-and-so to attend?" And they both heard her in the back seat say, "No, thank you." When I was 13, I had an incredibly vivid dream. Beautiful colors, sunny skies. And part of the dream, there were these 2 bulls fighting in my house. The fighting was about as scary as a children's book. I shooed them out and went on my merry way. After waking up, I got ready for school, and my mom started driving toward town. Out in the distance, I saw 2 bulls fighting. In the 9 years of living there, that's the only time I ever saw it. I grew up in a very rural area. Mostly crop farms. About a mile from my parents' house, there was an old abandoned farmhouse that all the area kids said was haunted. They would sneak into it after dark, all the typical stupid kid things. But I believe there are things in this world better left alone, and I never went. Years passed. The house fell into disrepair and was eventually torn down, leaving an old, weathered barn. I make a little side, money-selling photos of abandoned places. So I wanted a picture of the barn. I parked on the road and started walking up the drive. I made it about 10 feet before I just could not walk any further. My feet wouldn't move forward, my adrenaline spiked, and I burst into tears. So I turned back and ran to my car. I didn't feel safe until I'd crossed the creek you have to cross to get there. I let it go. But a few months later, we had to drive past the property after Christmas dinner with my parents. And there was something standing in the drive. It reminded me of a fawn. Super tall, with a wide head and horns. But the eyes were more on the side of the head. My adrenaline kicked in, and I burst into tears again. Trying to keep it together, because I didn't want to frighten my kids. My husband asked if I was okay. I just said, "You saw that, right?" "Yep." "Was it human?" "Nope." I refused to drive that road ever again. This one is my mother's. My uncle, her brother, was about 10 years older than her. Back in the 60s, he had a boat. And he used to take it from Florida to the Bahamas. It was a trip he had made many times. One day he left in the boat and vanished. They never found him, and they never found the boat. A short time after, my mother was at work, and her phone rang. It was a woman's voice. "Is this Carol?" "Yes." "I just wanted you to know that your brother died an honorable death." And then the woman hung up. Sometimes, when she tells the story, she mentions the Bermuda Triangle. But she says he was probably just robbed, and the boat stolen. It's the phone call that makes me think it was someone they knew. I was out with my parents, and it was late coming back home. At around 2:30 in the morning, we were stopped at a traffic signal. And a homeless man came and knocked on the window where my mother was sitting. As she rolled it down to give him money, he said, "Check what is happening at your brother's house." He took the money and walked away. Thinking he was a bit confused, we didn't bother and we went home. The next morning, my mom got a call from her brother's wife. He had had a heart attack. At 2:30 in the morning. My son was 4 when he was able to name my grandmother by name. From a picture of her in her 20s that had been in storage. My mom and I were going through it. My grandmother died before my wife, and I even met. He said she was the lady who taught him how to do his silly laugh. His silly laugh, as we called it, sounded just like my grandmother's. And the reason it was so specific was this. My grandmother had a brain aneurysm when my mom was in her teens. It paralyzed the left side of her body, including her vocal cords and her lips. And it gave her a very distinct and odd-sounding laugh. When I was a kid, maybe 10 or 12, I was carrying a load of laundry upstairs. Home alone, while my mom was out running errands. We had this strange carpet runner over our hardwood stairs that was only really attached at the top. Not fitted to each individual step. So naturally, I stepped on an air bubble of carpet, with my vision blocked by the laundry, and fell backwards while bear hugging a pile of blankets. I specifically remember thinking, well, I guess I'm about to die. I was almost airborne, with just my big toe left on the carpet, when I felt 2 hands, one on either side of my shoulder blades, give me a firm shove that launched me back up onto the step and against the stair rail. I assumed my mom had somehow come home early without announcing herself. And I turned around to thank her, still clinging to the railing. No one was there. I called her name and walked the whole house, checking if any doors were unlocked. If her car was there. I finally called her cell, and she told me she was still out. hitting up a few more stores. It still feels like there's a presence on that stairwell. Like someone's watching, but in a protective way. I was working night security for a small office at a sanitation plant. The building had a single entrance, and you had to check in at the security station to get in or out. A worker showed up and checked in, saying he needed to take care of a few things and grab some stuff. So I checked his ID, flipped a few lights on for him, and went back about my business. A few hours later, my shift was almost over, and I still hadn't seen him come back. So I went to patrol the building to find him, and I literally could not find him anywhere. He wasn't in any of the areas I'd turned the lights on for. No other lights were on. He wasn't in any other room. I stopped by security to see if we had just missed each other, and nobody was there. I did a second patrol. Still nothing. So I went to check the cameras to see where he'd gone. He isn't on a single camera, except the one covering the entrance and the security station. He turns down a hallway, and he never shows up on the next camera down that hall. I logged it as an incident and got out of there the moment my relief showed up. The next day, my boss called me and said that worker had been on vacation, out of state for several days, and he wouldn't be back for several more. Nobody could offer any explanation. This is my close friend's. His sister said that he had asked her a question, poking his head and half his body out of his bedroom door, visible from the couch, to ask when their grandma was coming back home. They didn't know and told him as much. So he went back into his room and closed the door. And then who comes walking into the house with the grandma helping with the groceries? Back in 2010, my family and I lived in a really nice home out in the woods. And there were always strange things happening in that house. Things that were unexplainable. One day, I was coming up the stairs from the basement, and as I rounded the corner, I saw a shadowy figure running up the stairs from the main floor to the top floor. I only caught it out of the corner of my eye, and it was gone in an instant. Fast forward a couple of years. I had moved on to college, and my parents decided to sell the house and downsize. They had just finished repainting most of the walls, and I asked my cousin if she could take a picture so I could see how they looked. She took it from the back of the living room, facing the front of the house, with the staircase off to the right. And in the picture is that same shadow I had seen years before. She was the only one in the home when the picture was taken, and it looks like it's looking right at you. As my great-grandfather passed away, my aunt and uncle had an unopened voicemail on their landline answering machine. When they listened to it, it sounded exactly like my great-grandpa saying, "God help me." And then it faded off. The thing that gets me the most is that my aunt and uncle requested a log of their incoming and outgoing calls. There were no calls logged in that time frame at all. I've heard the voicemail. 4 years ago, my daughter sleepwalked into my room while my wife and I were asleep. She nudged me and said, "Dad isn't breathing." I said, "Honey, I'm fine, I'm right here, I'm okay." She replied, "He won't wake up." "Why won't Dad wake up?" I said, "Honey, I'm awake, I'm talking to you." She then turned around and went back to bed. I looked at the clock. It was 11 minutes past 2 in the morning. My wife said, "What was that about?" I said I don't know, and we went back to sleep. The next morning we were all at work, just talking, getting ready for the day. And my boss came over and told us that one of our coworkers had passed in the night. We asked how and when. He told us it was a heart attack at around 2 in the morning. I had to sit down. At the time, that coworker was remodeling a new home, and his daughter was staying with him. My daughter and his daughter had become good friends, playing softball together. All I could think was that my daughter was acting out what his daughter was saying. That night, trying to wake him up. My granddad died when I was 7. But by his own words, I was his absolute favorite. Partly because I'm the spitting image of his mother, even into adulthood. When I was 21, I was about to give birth to my first son. I was getting into the elevator when a man came in, saying he was a volunteer and he'd help us find our way. The elevator was slow, so we spent the time talking about what a blessing children are and how they grow up so fast. Here's the thing. He looked and sounded exactly like my granddad. Same build, same blue-gray eyes, same faint Scottish-Canadian accent, same khakis, same checked shirt. Same sky blue cardigan. And here's the part that gets me. The nurses said they don't have any older male volunteers in that building. I don't really believe in ghosts, but I'm absolutely certain Granddad paid me a visit that night. My mom and dad were codependent, and they liked it that way. They were completely happy to be wrapped up in each other. My dad died the day before his birthday. Afterwards, it was like he was still home. His touch lamp beside his recliner would come on by itself. The recliner would rock, like someone was getting into it. And sometimes my mom or my sister would hear my dad saying, "Honey, fix me a cold drink." That was exactly how he'd ask my mom to fill his mug with soda over ice. My mother died less than a year and a half later. And after she died, there was never another sign of either of them. They've been gone now for close to 14 years. I was about 15 and trying to sleep, but having an asthma attack. Late in the night, I started hearing a rhythmic breathing from the floor next to the bed. It wasn't scary. It was more comforting. And it wasn't me, because my breathing sounded way more ragged than that. It helped me calm down and get to sleep, even though I was still sick. At the time, I thought it was a friendly ghost. I later rationalized that maybe I was hearing a family member through the heating ducts. What I realized years later, when I had a dog, was that it had sounded exactly like a big dog sleeping next to the bed. One night, I had a dream about my grandpa, who had died almost 20 years before. We were in his home, and he kept telling me, "We need to clean the house. We need to get the house ready." When I asked him why, he just said, "She's coming home." My grandma, his wife of 50 years, died the next day. When I bought my house, there was an above-ground pool that hadn't had a liner or a pump in 15 years. I put in a new liner and a new pump. I filled the pool and got it all working one evening. I was proud of having done it myself, and I wasn't worried at all. That night, I had a dream about my grandma, who had died about 2 weeks before. She woke me up out of the dream at about 4 in the morning. And all I knew was that I had to go look at the pool. I went outside and found that I hadn't tightened the hose clamp on the return hose. And pool water was shooting out of it. From the amount of water on the ground, I could tell it had only been happening about 5 minutes. I put the hose back on, tightened the clamps, and lost almost none of the water. I'm not superstitious, and I don't really believe in ghosts. But I don't have any explanation for it other than that. I was crossing the street at the crosswalk, and I took one step into the road when all of a sudden I felt the word stop shoot through my body. And I froze. Right at that moment, a truck flew by, right in front of me. I was nearly clipped by the side mirror. I've told myself that, although I didn't realize it, I must have seen it flying through the red light in my peripheral vision. But I don't know. I was in college, walking to class. I went across a busy street, and a hand grabbed my shoulder quite hard and stopped me. A car went past that would have killed me. Nobody was behind me. Nobody was anywhere close enough to have stopped me. A couple of years ago, my father's immediate family had a reunion in Minnesota. We stayed at a little cabin on a lake. And of course, sitting around the campfire, my uncle was telling all of his ghost stories, which put me just a bit on edge. Later, when I went back to my room to go to sleep, I flipped off the light switch, and immediately, both closet doors popped fully open. I lost my mom when I was 10. I'm now in my mid-30s. 2 years ago, I lost my wedding ring. We looked everywhere. I even played back the security camera at work to see if I was still wearing it when I left. I gave up finding it, and I was very upset. One night, I had a dream that my mom woke me up and said, "I know you've been looking for this. I love you. It'll be out here." In the morning, I was getting ready for work as usual, and I sat down on the couch. Right in front of me, on the ottoman, was my ring. I went to bed after my wife, and she woke up after me. I had used that ottoman the night before, and there's no way the ring could have been there. I checked our camera again. We kept one facing the front door, and it could see our couch. The ottoman had no ring on it when I went to bed. I still cry every now and then remembering it. I used to work at a Boy Scout camp. My cabin was the furthest away from the center of camp, about 2 miles from everyone else. One night, I was walking down the trail at 3 in the morning, and through the shadows, I saw a hand reach out to grab me. I panicked and I swung at it. And then silence. The hand was gone. My arm was still out in the air. I ran as fast as I could back to my cabin. My father died in 2000 in my parents' house. I was over one night, pretty late, after my mother had gone to sleep. And I swear I could feel my father's presence, because I was right in the spot where he had died. Anyway, I thought to myself, this is stupid. People don't leave essences behind. I'm not feeling anything. So I said out loud, "If this is really you, Dad." Knock a box of cereal off the shelf onto the floor. I wanted to pick something I didn't think could happen by accident. I went into the kitchen and watched that shelf for a few minutes, and nothing happened. It was almost midnight, so I decided to sleep in my old bedroom. I woke up the next morning, went downstairs, and a box of cereal was lying on the floor. I said to my mother, "Did you knock that cereal onto the floor?" She said no. It was like that when she woke up. My mother did have a cat. I'm guessing the cat did it. But if she'd gotten up on that shelf, everything would have been knocked around and messy. Everything else was in its normal position. Just the one box on the floor. Many years ago, my parents had separated, and my father was planning a trip across the country to California. He was pretty excited about it. I talked to him the day before he was leaving, wished him well. Told him I'd talk to him when he got there. The day of the trip. He called and told me he had decided at the last minute not to go. He refused to really get into why. He just said he changed his mind, which seemed really odd for something he'd been planning for a couple of months. That night, I was sitting at my girlfriend's house, and we were watching the news. And they reported that the flight my dad was supposed to be on had collided with another aircraft while landing. It was several months before he finally told me that the night before, he'd had an extremely vivid dream that he died in a fiery plane crash. So vivid that it scared him out of flying that day. My dad is a Marine Corps Vietnam veteran who saw combat. I can only imagine how vivid that dream must have been. To scare him out of getting on that plane.